An engine that outlives the man who bought it, past 1,000,000 miles, still catching on the first turn of the key. That is the thing you saw on the screen, and I promise you it is real. Germans do it on purpose. Not with secret parts, with a handful of small daily habits almost nobody outside Germany was ever taught. I was standing at a taxi rank in Hamburg a few winters ago when a battered old Mercedes rolled up with more than 900,000 kilometers on the odometer, and it idled softer than my neighbor's brand new sedan. That number would not let me sleep. So I pulled the thread. And it ends at a single finding buried in the archives of a combustion engine institute in Aachen. One thing you can do in the car already sitting in your driveway tomorrow morning. Now let me tell you why that Hamburg taxi bothered me so much. Because everything I thought I knew said it should not exist. I grew up believing you baby an engine to make it last. You drive gently. You keep the speed down. You never push it. And here were the Germans doing the exact opposite. They build roads with no speed limit. They hold cars at 120, 140 miles an hour for an hour at a stretch. On paper, that should cook an engine in a few short years. Yet the same country turns out engines that run 3 times longer than ours. That contradiction is where my investigation started. If speed killed engines, German engines should die youngest. Instead, they die oldest. So the thing keeping them alive could not be gentleness. It had to be something else. Something the fast driving was hiding in plain sight. The first hard clue I found had a name attached to it. A taxi driver in Thessaloniki named Gregorios Sakinidis. He drove a Mercedes-Benz 240D, the boxy W123 model with the old OM617 diesel under the hood, and by the time he was done, that car had covered 4.6 million kilometers. That is nearly 3 million miles. Mercedes was so stunned they took the car for their own museum in Stuttgart and handed him a newer one to say thank you. The engine had never been rebuilt from the ground up. 3 million miles. One engine, and here is what stopped me cold. When reporters asked him his secret, he did not talk about the factory. He did not brag about German steel. He talked about how he treated it, the way he started it, the way he warmed it, the way he drove the first few minutes of every single trip. The engineering got him to the starting line. His habits ran the marathon. Therefore, the real question was never what the Germans build. It was what they do. And the more German drivers, mechanics, and old family friends I asked, the more I realized they were all doing the same small things without even thinking about it. Habits passed down so quietly that most of them could not tell me why they did it. They just always had. Their fathers did it. Their driving instructors drilled it into them. But one habit came up again and again, and it made no sense to me at first. They refused to warm the engine up the way I always had. Every cold morning of my life, I did what my own father taught me. Start the car. Let it sit and idle. Give it 5-10 minutes to warm up while I scraped the windows and finished my coffee. Every German I asked looked at me like I had confessed to a crime. They start the engine, and within 30 seconds they are rolling down the road. No long idle. Ever. Now here is where the investigation turned dark, because I wanted to know why. And what I found is that the single most damaging thing that happens to an engine does not happen at high speed at all. It happens in the first few minutes after a cold start. Engineers who study engine wear will tell you that a huge share of the total wear an engine ever suffers. Some estimates put it as high as 3/4 happens during cold starting and warm-up before the oil is hot. Not on the highway, not at full throttle. In your driveway, while the engine sits there cold, think about what that means. All those mornings I let my car idle to protect it, I was actually holding it in the exact condition that destroys it longer than I needed to. Cold oil is thick as syrup. It clings to the bottom of the engine and takes its time crawling up to the parts that need it. Metal is grinding on metal up top with almost no protection, and an idling engine barely produces any heat, so it stays cold and thick and starving, far longer than an engine that is actually working. So who taught me to idle? Where did that habit even come from? I traced it back, and it is a leftover from cars built before the 1980s, old carbureted engines that genuinely would stall if you drove off cold. That advice made sense in 1965. It has been wrong for 40 years. But it never got corrected here, because nobody selling you anything had a reason to correct it. A quick lube chain does not lose a dime if your engine wears out early. A dealership makes more money the sooner you are back for a new one. The myth just sat there, quietly costing people whole engines, and nobody bothered to knock it down. The Germans knocked it down, and I found out it was not left to chance. Because in Germany, letting your engine sit and idle for no reason is not just frowned upon, it is written into the road traffic code. Paragraph 30 of the German Straßenverkehrsordnung, the national traffic law, forbids running an engine unnecessarily. Sit there idling in your driveway to warm up, and a neighbor can report you, and you can be fined somewhere around 80 euros for it. That rule has roots going back to the 1930s, tightened over the decades for noise and for fumes. Whatever the reason on paper, the effect on the street was enormous. It trained an entire nation, generation after generation, out of the one habit that quietly kills engines and into the habit that saves them. And what is that habit? This is the part that flipped everything I believed. Instead of warming the engine by letting it idle, Germans warm it by driving it gently. They call it warmfahren, warming through driving. You start the car, you pull away within half a minute, and for the first several miles you keep it calm, low revs, light pedal, no hard acceleration. You let the engine make its heat by doing easy work, not by sitting still doing nothing. Here is why that beats idling every single time. A working engine, even a gently working one, warms up 2 to 3 times faster than an idling one. Faster warm-up means the oil gets thin and protective sooner, which means the dangerous cold wear window is far shorter. You are moving the engine through its most vulnerable minutes as fast as possible instead of dragging them out in your driveway. It is the difference between wading slowly into cold water and getting the crossing over with quickly. Same destination. One of them does not leave you shivering. But warming through driving raised a new question that nagged at me, and it turned out to be the deepest one of all. How does a German driver actually know when the engine is warm? Because I had always trusted the temperature needle on the dashboard. When it climbs to the middle and sits there, the car is warm, right? That is what the gauge is telling me. That is what it told my father. So I called a mechanic in Stuttgart, a man who had worked on these engines his whole life, and he laughed at me down the phone. He said the gauge on my dashboard was lying to me. Not broken. Lying by design. Because that needle almost never measures your oil. It measures your coolant, the water, and antifreeze that cools the engine block. And coolant heats up fast. On a mild day, coolant can hit its normal running temperature in about 5 minutes. So the needle swings to the middle, and you think, good, she's warm, time to put my foot down. But your oil is not warm. Your oil, the thing that actually protects the moving metal, can take 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes to reach full temperature 3 or 4 times longer than the coolant the gauge is showing you. That gap is a trap. Millions of drivers see the needle hit the middle, floor the accelerator onto the highway, and hammer a cold-oiled engine at full load while believing they are protecting it. The gauge told them it was safe. The gauge was measuring the wrong fluid, and that is exactly the shape of the problem, isn't it? You were never careless, you were taught the car wrong, and nobody at the counter had any reason to correct you. Everything I am handing you in this video is yours, free, and it works. But this video is one thread. When I sat down and wrote it all out properly, it became 3 books. The Habits That Are Quietly Killing an Engine, and the 5 Better Minutes a Week That Reverse Them, How to Read a Repair Estimate Line by Line and Refuse the Padding Before You Ever Pay for a Fake Repair, and the Full Driveway Checklist with the used car rules and the real cases of ordinary cars past 300,000 and even 500,000 miles. No new tools, no imported parts, no trip to the counter, just what you already own, treated correctly. If you want the complete version of what is working for you right now, scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment for the books. Now, back to that lying needle, because the Germans did not just complain about it, they did something about it, and it tells you everything about how they think. And this is exactly why the Germans, who obsess over this, put a second gauge in so many of their performance cars, a real oil temperature gauge, right next to the coolant one. They wanted the truth, not the comfortable version. A proper BMW or Porsche driver does not push the engine until the oil reads about 90 degrees Celsius, right around 190 Fahrenheit, not until the oil says so, never just the water. So the habit underneath the habit was this: warm by driving, not idling, and judge warmth by the oil, not the needle. And once I understood that, the whole picture of that Hamburg taxi started to come into focus. That driver was never babying his engine. He was protecting it through the danger zone, fast and correctly, then letting it do the work it was built for. Now I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. You are thinking this is fine for someone with a fancy German car and an oil temperature gauge, but your car is ordinary and it does not have one, so none of this can help you. I want to stop right here and tell you that you are the person I dug hardest for, because the best part of what I found needs no special car, no gauge, no gadget, and not $1 spent. It works in the exact vehicle sitting outside your window, whatever it is, starting tomorrow morning. Here is the whole method, and you can do all of it today. When you start your car on a cold morning, do not sit and idle it. Give it maybe 30 seconds, just long enough for the oil pressure to come up, then drive off gently. For the first 10 minutes, treat the pedal like there is an egg under it. Keep the revs low under about 2,000 turns of the engine if you have a rev counter, and if you do not, just keep your acceleration soft and easy. No hard merges. No flooring it up and on ramp. No full throttle. You are simply letting the engine make its heat by rolling along at an easy pace. And since you do not have an oil gauge, use the clock instead. Do not judge warmth by that coolant needle in the first 10 minutes, because now you know it is lying to you. Give it a solid 10 to 15 minutes of gentle driving before you ask the engine for anything hard. On a bitter cold day, closer to 20, that is your oil quietly coming up to temperature and finally protecting every surface the way it is meant to. It costs you nothing. It changes nothing about your day, except the order in which you do things. You drive gently first, instead of sitting still first. There is a second free habit that pairs with it, and it may be the most valuable thing in this entire video for the ordinary driver. Stop taking so many tiny trips. The short hop, 2 miles to the shop, 3 miles to drop someone off, engine off before it ever gets hot, is quietly one of the worst things you can do to a motor. On a trip that short, the oil never reaches full temperature at all. And here is the ugly part. A cold engine dumps unburned fuel and water vapor into the oil. When the oil gets properly hot, that fuel and water boil off and vanish. When it never gets hot, they stay. They sit in your oil, thinning it, turning it acidic, building sludge, trip after trip after trip. The engine is slowly poisoning its own blood. The German fix costs nothing again. They chain their errands together into one longer trip instead of 5 cold little ones. And once a week or so, they take the car out for a good long run, 20, 30 minutes of steady driving, long enough to get everything fully hot and boil all that trapped moisture and fuel straight out of the oil. If you drive mostly short trips, that 1 weekly long drive alone can add years to your engine. You already own the car. You already have somewhere to drive. You are just changing when and how, not what. Therefore, the person with the old, ordinary car is not shut out of this at all. They may benefit the most, because they are the ones most likely to have been idling and short-tripping an engine to an early grave without ever knowing it. But there was still one habit on my list that seemed to contradict everything else, and it drove me half mad until I understood it. Every German driver and mechanic told me you must warm gently and drive gently cold. Then several of the same people told me that every so often you must take the engine out and run it hard, rev it high, let it breathe near the top of its range for a few minutes. That sounded insane next to everything else. Why would people this careful ever thrash an engine on purpose? Because of carbon. Modern engines, especially ones driven gently and on short trips, slowly build up carbon deposits, soot and gunk baked onto valves, injectors, and inside the exhaust system. Drive softly all the time and never let the engine get fully hot and fast, and that carbon just accumulates until it starts choking performance and fouling parts. The Germans have an old habit for clearing it. Once the engine is fully warm, never cold, always fully warm, you take it up through the gears and let it run at high revs for a few minutes, safely and legally, on an open stretch. The heat and the exhaust flow burn that carbon loose and blow it out. Some call it a clearing run. It is not abuse. It is maintenance. It is why the same engineers who preach gentleness also preach that an engine occasionally needs to stretch its legs. And this told me something important about the whole German philosophy. They are not gentle out of fear. They are precise. Gentle exactly when the engine is vulnerable, cold and unprotected. Firm and full exactly when it is ready, hot and hungry. They match what they ask of the engine to the state the engine is actually in. That is the entire secret in one sentence, and almost nobody drives that way here. There are more habits in the pattern, each one small. They use engine braking, letting off the accelerator, and downshifting to slow the car on long hills instead of riding the brakes until they smoke. On turbocharged cars, they let the engine idle for 30 seconds or so after a hard drive before switching off, giving the red-hot turbo bearing time to cool with the oil still flowing instead of shutting it off hot and cooking the oil inside it. They never lug the engine, never crawl along in too high a gear at very low revs with the engine straining and shuddering because that starves the bearings under load. They change the oil on schedule and never stretch it to save a few dollars because they know that oil is the one thing standing between metal and metal. And they fix the small fault the day it appears before it becomes the big one. 17 habits in all by the time I had them written out on my kitchen table. But as I stared at that list, something clicked. And this is the answer to the whole mystery, the thing that Hamburg Taxi had been trying to tell me from the very first morning. Every single one of those 17 habits is a version of one buried principle. And I finally found it stated plainly in the research files of the Combustion Engine Institute at RWTH Aachen, the great technical university where German engineers have studied how motors live and die for over a century. Stripped of all the jargon, it comes down to this. An engine is not worn out by hard work. It is worn out by being asked to work hard before it is ready, and by being made to sit cold when it should be warming, and cold when it should be hot. The enemy was never speed. The enemy was always the wrong thing at the wrong temperature. That is the master key. That is what connects the gentle, cold start to the occasional hard clearing run, the refusal to idle to the weekly long drive, the oil gauge to the turbo cool down. Every habit is the same instinct wearing a different coat. Never ask the cold engine for what only the hot engine can safely give. And the moment it is hot, do not baby it into a sludge-choked early death either, let it live. The reason it stayed hidden from the rest of us is almost funny once you see it. The knowledge was never locked in a vault. It was hiding inside a habit so ordinary that the people doing it could not even explain it. A German driver does not think, "Today I shall preserve my engine through thermal management." He just pulls away gently because his instructor smacked the dashboard when he revved it cold, and his father did the same, and a traffic code trained the idling out of the whole country before he was born. The method survived not in a book but in a reflex, passed hand to hand at the kitchen table in the driving school, while the rest of us kept idling in our driveways because a carburetor from 1965 needed it, and nobody ever told us it stopped being true. And now the reflex is yours. Start it, roll gently within 30 seconds, drive soft for the first 10 to 15 minutes, ignore the lying needle and trust the clock, chain your errands into longer trips, take one good long run a week, and once in a while when she is fully hot, let her breathe. That is the whole million-mile discipline, taken from a Stuttgart museum, a Thessaloniki taxi, and an engineer's file in Aachen, and it fits the car you already own. You did not learn a trick today. You took back something that was quietly taken from you, the simple truth that the machine in your driveway was built to last 2 or 3 times longer than you were ever allowed to believe, and that keeping it alive costs nothing but the order in which you do a few small things each morning. I think you are the kind of person who cannot let a strange number sit unexplained, who sees an old engine outliving a new one and needs to know why, and suspects, correctly, that the answer was buried because somebody profits from your engine dying young. That instinct is right. Trust it. So tell me one thing down in the comments. When you start your car tomorrow, how long have you been letting it idle to warm up? 30 seconds? 5 minutes? 10? Be honest. I did 10 for 30 years. Write your number below, and while you are there, tell me where in the world you are watching from, because I read every one. And if someone you love is out there right now warming their car in the driveway the old way, send this to them before winter. It might be worth a whole engine. If you believe, like I do, that a lot of genuinely useful knowledge has been quietly buried because keeping us dependent is more profitable than keeping us capable, then come along with me. This channel is a small movement of people digging that knowledge back up, one habit at a time. Because the next thread I am pulling is about why German cars survive salted winter roads that rot ours to lace in 5 years. And it starts with a strange thing they do to the underside of the car every autumn, in the driveway, with something most of you already have in your garage. I found the document. I will bring it to you next. This video gave you the overview, but there's more. Inside the Old Ways circle, I pick up right where this left off. You can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. And you won't be alone. Practical folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time with one click, no risk. Now, before you buy another bottle for your engine, let me show you something. Many of those fuel injector cleaners can actually do harm. In the next video, I'll reveal which ones truly work. It's starting right here.